Thank you, Elder Daniel. Like I said just now, I was going to say a few more words about the singing. I think when a little child, 6, 7, 8 years old, sings well, it's actually the work of the mother trying to put in a lot of effort. And I think there are many parents like this in this church, putting a lot of energy, a lot of effort into growing our children to be good in serving God and to train them in the ways of God. So I thank all the parents for that. The next thing I want to say really is that the song was really appropriate for the ordination of our new elder today. As we all know, that the job or the position of an elder is actually the highest position mentioned in the Bible, the elder. It's a very important position that Albin has agreed to take up, and the church would like to thank him for that leadership. And also the deacons, being the other high office in the church, and the 3 deacons that were ordained and received a gift from the church would thank you for your willingness to serve after the tradition of Stephen, the first martyr. The Bible text that we read just now is probably something that you have read in the Bible, in the book of Ecclesiastes. But today I want to draw your attention to another book, the book of Job. But before we go there, I'd like to give an introduction. A little girl came back from school, first day in school. You know how little girls, when they go to school for the first day, mommy or daddy or both will be there, watching from outside the classroom, probably not allowed to go in, Anyway, this little girl was kind of quite accustomed to that new adventure. She came home in one piece, did not cry or did not wet the pants, have to change new ones. She came home and the mom said, "Well, you did well today. You did excellently." And she said, "Oh, well, it's okay." By the way, this is not my daughter, okay? We don't talk about our daughters from the pulpit unless I get permission. And the mom said, "Okay, that's good. Tomorrow we go to school again." She said, No, I'm not going anymore." "Why? You've done well. Why don't you go?" Well, the little girl said, "Let me explain to you. You see, I can talk a lot, I've been talking since 2 years old, but they don't allow me to talk. I cannot write. I haven't learned how to write, but they kept asking me to write. So I'm not going anymore." Now, do you like to talk? Do you talk with your friends? Huh? Do you have conversations? Do you talk to your wife, your husband, your children, your friends, your colleagues? We talk, right? We have conversations. The Chinese language, it's not very expressive. The Chinese language is not very expressive in terms of emotion and all that. But the Chinese language has many, many proverbs or idioms to talk about talking. For example, they say you talk about heaven and the earth. That means you talk about everything. And they say you talk about 7 and 8. That means you're talking about this and that, sundry things. Why do people talk? What conversation did you have yesterday? Can you just spend a moment and think back? What was the conversation you had, and whom did you talk to? Was it a social small talk? Was it business talk, work talk, Was it talk about family? Was it about children? About politics? About the situation in Lahad Datu? People talk. In fact, they found that there are just a few people that you've spent most of your time talking to in life. And these are people that you care a lot about. Another point to think, if you have not talked to your loved ones lately, or your family, your parents, or your children, or your spouse, maybe you want to think about talking more. People talk because talking is a way of projecting the image they want to give to the person they talk to. You notice when a boss is talking to a subordinate, it's a different way. Now, the boss may want to project a friendly image, so then he talks a different way too. The book of Job is full of conversations. In fact, the book of Job, if you have read the book, unless you are an expert in exegesis, in analyzing the Bible, you probably come away a little bit confused. Because there's so many people talking in that book. And they said so many things, and you don't really know which parts are actually the right thing and which parts are actually the wrong thing that needs to be corrected later on. In that book, you saw God speaking to Satan, Satan speaking back to God. Job's 3 friends came to visit. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar spoke to him. He spoke back to them. Then Elihu came and spoke. Then God spoke, and then Job spoke, and then there was silence. Full of conversations. For example, the Lord said to Satan, "Whence comest thou?" Or "Where do you come from?" And Satan answered the Lord and said, "I come from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down in it." Job chapter 1 verse 7. Then the question is asked, hey, in this conversation that's transpired, we ask, why is he walking around on the earth? Was he trespassing? Was that criminal trespassing? You know, is this his place that he should come and walk about? Maybe this is his territory. Maybe he owns this place. Maybe there's no more trespassing. That's why he was so brave, so bold to tell God, I'm walking up and down in that place because I've staked my claim. Hey, was Satan doing his round, walking up and down like doctors in many hospitals do, to make sure that things are happening according to his plan? Well, doctors do their rounds, right? They walk about, they make sure that the patients are doing just as they thought they should be doing. And if not, then some intervention. Now, that particular conversation alone can become a big sermon, a book even. Because that particular conversation between God and Satan tells us that there is always a history behind the history that we can see. The events of this life are just the visible shadows of some spiritual, invisible struggles behind. The book of Job was an example of this dual history happening in the universe. When King Herod tried to kill Jesus, it was just a shadow of the real struggle. Not an earthly king trying to make sure that nobody would grow up and take over his position. No. It's a shadow of something bigger, of a bigger villain who is trying to extinguish the plan of salvation for the whole universe. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, it wasn't because of some prayer and some people gossiping and trying to get him in trouble. It was really the good and the evil struggling, and there's a judgment to be had. There is always spiritual struggles at the back of things that we see apparently in front of us. There are always things that we don't understand, at least at this end of eternity. Of course, we always say when we get to heaven, oh, when we get to heaven, we have so many questions to ask God. But no, on this earth, there are so many things that happen that we don't understand. In the book of Job, chapter 23, verse 11 and 12, my foot had held his steps, his way I have kept. I have not declined, neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips. I have esteemed the words of his mouth more than my necessary food, Job said. Job said that Job, was a good person. I have kept the words of God, he said. I have not even done anything that is against God. But we all know that Job, he experienced extreme suffering. And this is him talking. He said, why? Why am I suffering? And he further said, why am I suffering? Why should I suffer? I not only am a good person, I am a good advocate. This morning in the Sabbath school, one of our brothers said we should not be just doing our little environmental, protecting the earth thing. We should become advocate. And I say hallelujah. Job said, I delivered the poor that cried. Now that is action. And the fatherless. And to him that had none, I helped him. The blessing of him that was ready to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. He was not only actively doing good, not only good, but actively doing good, and he was also an advocate of good. He said, I put on righteousness, and he clothed me. My judgment was a robe and a diadem. I was eyes to the blind. He helped the blind. I was feet to the lame. And I was father to the poor, and the cause which I knew not, I search out. And I break the jaws of the wicked. Now, this is a little bit extreme. He will break the jaws of the wicked on behalf of the weak, and plucked the spoil out of his teeth. The stranger did not lodge in the street, but I opened my doors to the travelers. Oh, that one would hear me. Behold, my desire is that the Almighty would answer me, and that my adversary had written a book. So Job, who was suffering, lost all his children, all his properties, and was having boils all over, from the sole of his feet to his head, he was crying out. He was suffering, and he maintained his innocence, and he believed he would be justified by God. Job, when you come to this point, really talks about suffering, isn't it? When we suffer, it's actually part of the controversy we are talking about. Remember the dual history. We suffer in this human flesh. We do not know what is behind, but we suffer. And when we suffer, it's not good enough to say, hey, brother, don't worry. There is some other history playing out back there, and you are just part of the shadow, so just deal with it. No, right? We cannot do that. Especially when you are suffering. When you are suffering, suddenly the perspective is very different. And Job is in that situation. And the book of Job, if you analyze everything, basically comes down to how we look at suffering. Well, one of the perspectives I've given you is that suffering is because there is another history being played out. That's one point. Secondly, there are other thinkings about suffering. Job wanted an answer. He said, why? Well, then his friends came along, Eliphaz, in Job 15, verse 20. If you have time, jot it down, and you have time, you read it afterwards. Eliphaz's theory of suffering is this. Hey, Job, you are suffering because you are bad. You are suffering because you're wicked. You are just experiencing that because you are wicked. And to that, Job said, no, I'm not. Okay? But Eliphaz, if you read his sayings, are mainly centering on the fact that people who are good don't suffer, people who are bad suffer. That's it. Simple. When Job protested and said, no, I'm not bad. I told you, I'm not only passive good, I'm active good. I'm not active good, I'm advocate good. Then Bildad jumped in and he said something else. His ideas, if you lump it together, is actually summarized in Job 18 verse 5, which says this, yea, the light of the wicked shall be put out. The spark of his fire shall not shine. Now what does that mean? It means that because you are wicked, not only you will suffer, the people around you will suffer. That's why your children suffer. That's why your properties are lost. And so he used the word, the spark of your fire shall not shine. What does that mean? Your spark of your fire shall not shine. When we cook something with fire, the heat comes from the fire, right? And there are sparks coming out. And that spark can be referred to as the descendants of the fire. Okay? I mean, at least it's in the Hebrew mind. And so when your spark shall not shine, means that your descendants will also suffer. And so his theory of suffering, Bildad, is that, yes, good people don't suffer, bad people suffer, and bad people's friends and relatives, the people related to them, are also have to suffer because of him. Okay? And Job said, how can you say that? How can you say that, right? Now, before Job could defend himself, Jophar jumped in, and he said, oh, yes, 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 because Job said, how can you say I'm a bad person? How can you say all these things? Didn't you know that God blessed me? Didn't you know that I have so many things and I have so much property, that I'm so wealthy? Didn't you know that at one point I was wealthy? Jophar said, yeah. You know why? Jophar said, the triumph of the wicked is short, the joy of the hypocrite for a moment. So what Jophar was trying to tell Job is another theory of suffering. That is, yeah, the wicked people may enjoy life, but it's just for a short time. You will suffer in the end. Okay? So if you read the book of Job today, if you go back and read it again, try to see these theories of suffering. First is that when you suffer, you may just ask all kinds of questions. That's Job's response. Eliphaz's response is, yeah, I have a theory. Good don't suffer, bad suffer. Bildad's theory is the bad people suffer, the wicked suffer, and their relatives and their family will suffer and deserve to die. And Jophar's theory is that, yeah, wicked people may enjoy life for a while, but in the end, they will suffer. When Job heard all this, he was so heartbroken because these people were supposed to come and comfort him. But in the end, they condemned him. They were supposed to be there to comfort a suffering person. But in the end, they did not. You know, sometimes when we go to comfort someone, we can learn from these friends what not to do. Sometimes it's okay, just be silent. When they came and sat down with Job and put ashes on them, up to that point, they were doing a good job. They didn't say a word. They were comforting him. But when they opened their mouth, not very good. So it's okay. Sometimes when we go and visit to a funeral, to someone who is sick, to sit down and don't say too much and just be there. The presence is important. Anyway, Job got so frustrated, he said, but ye are forgers of lies. Ye are all physicians of no value. Job said to his friends, you are useless, miserable comforters. You know me. Why do you have to come up with theories to try to explain away my situation instead of knowing me as you know me as a friend? Anyway, there was a young man who was there who started talking too. His name was Elihu. Elihu was so angry when he heard all these people talking. When he heard Job was asking so many questions. When he heard that this first guy said, no, you're wicked, that's why you suffer. And he was so mad that the second guy said, that's why you suffer and your children die. And he was so mad that the third guy said, well, the bad people may enjoy life but then suffer later. He could not stop himself, and finally he said, let me speak. Okay? And what did he say when he spoke? If you read Elihu's theory of suffering was this. Elihu was saying, none of this. Actually, God is trying to wake you up. Meaning, suffering is discipline. So Elihu said, because when God whispered to you, you don't listen. That's why God is shouting. Okay? Is that true? Is suffering a discipline from God? Well, that is what Elihu was trying to say. So, Job, you're wrong. Don't ask questions. The rest of you are wrong. Actually, God is giving you suffering to teach you so that you can become a better son. Okay? So, we have now another theory, right? Why do we suffer? Because God is trying to discipline us. Thank God, finally God spoke. When God finally spoke, what happened? What did God say? Well, apparently God did not give any answer. He started to ask many questions to Job. He said, do you know? Were you there when I created the world? Were you there when I did this, when I did that? Were you there? What was God trying to tell Job? God was trying to tell Job, you must trust me. You must trust me because I'm much wiser than you. That I have infinite wisdom and I have my infinite plan. Why do you ask? John Stott, who passed away last year, at that time, when he was still alive, he was probably the foremost, the most famous theologian in the Protestant world. He described the experience that Job had as if Job was given a big TV screen, that God in his vision, or in Job's vision, brought Job to the creation time and saw all these things being created and how the whole universe was put together. It was like a video of the creation. And finally, Job responded to God. You know what he said? He said, now I will keep my mouth shut. Now I will shut up, because now I have seen your power and your glory. Strange ending to a very profound question, isn't it? Why do we suffer? Is it because of some wickedness? Is it because of other people's wickedness? Is it because of all this? And also, does it mean that a person is wicked, then the family has to suffer? Does it mean that suffering is a way of discipline? The book of Job actually did not say all those were correct, except if we learn from Job's experience, we realize that Job's conclusion was, now I know that God is great. That because God is wise and loving and powerful, I will now surrender to God in silence. That's what Job did. And God, no, by the way, I forgot about the wife of Job. You know what did the wife say to Job when he was suffering? Curse God and die. Ooh. Terrible thing to say to God, huh? But God is big enough. God is big enough. Finally, God rebuked all Job's friends, right? And say, you guys are not representing me properly. But to Job's wife, no condemnation. God did not condemn Job's wife because what she said was truly from her heart, that she was so frustrated, and God allows that, and He's big enough to take that. Coming back to Job, finally, he concluded, God is good, God is great, God is wonderful, God is all-powerful, God is all-wise, and now I will shut my mouth. Okay? Now, what's the difference between Job and us? What's the difference between Job and us? Well, for one, a few thousand years, okay? He lived a few thousand years ago. He was given a glimpse of God's power and His glory and His wisdom, and that was enough for him. How about today? Today, I think we have more. We have more. We see more than what Job saw. We still see the power and the glory and the wisdom of God. But today, in light of Calvary, in light of what Jesus Himself did on the cross of Calvary, we now have an vantage point to look back and to look at suffering. Because on top of knowing that God is wonderful, powerful, wise, we also know that this God is a loving God. And it is that perspective that we must have when we suffer. The cross does not solve at this moment all the problems of suffering. That will be when Jesus comes back again. Today we all suffer many kinds of suffering. But the cross should give us the perspective and the comfort in suffering. Yes, there might be discipline involved, but that is not the most important lesson. You know, in the book of Revelation, John the Revelator saw there was a scroll. And the scroll actually contains the history and the future of humankind. And then he cried. Why did John the Revelator cry? Because he was told that no one is worthy to open that scroll. He cried. But then the angel said, don't cry. One is worthy. Only one person is worthy, and that is the Lamb of the Lord. Jesus Christ was able to unlock the future of the universe because of his sacrifice. And so today, we suffer. In life, yes, when you're too young, maybe you don't know about suffering. When you grow older, you know about the suffering, right? Suffering of losing our loved ones in death, suffering of all kinds, suffering of breaking down a relationship. What is our attitude? Should our attitude be one of self-pity, self-accusation like Job did when in the beginning of the book? Should our attitude be a self-condemnation that because we have done wrong, that we suffer and our family suffer? Should we say that, oh, well, let's take it as if it's a discipline? Or should we learn from the book of Job to surrender ourselves, to trust in this almighty, all-powerful, all-loving God, that he will know what is best for us? A dog, a German shepherd, was very close to the master. But one day the master had an accident and has to be hospitalized. The dog was very sad because you are not supposed to put the dog in the hospital. So he was kept at home, taken care of by other people. But the dog didn't want to eat. The dog didn't want to eat, getting skinnier and skinnier. And so finally the friend went to the doctor and said, can you please let the dog come and see the master? Because I think that's probably the way to solve the problem. And the doctor said, yeah, why not? And the dog was kind of moping around, you know, not wanting to do much. And the friend brought the dog to the hospital. Of course, the dog didn't know where they were going. And they went into the hospital. The dog didn't even know that it was a hospital. They went up the elevator. They went to the room of the master. And the dog was still moping around, you know. Then the friend knocked. And then suddenly the sick person, of course the patient, said, come in. That moment, the dog perked up because he heard the voice of his master, right? And when the door swung open, you know what the dog did? He jumped, the greatest jump that he could ever master his strength to do. He jumped straight into the room and bounced into the embrace of his master. One would ask, did the dog know what kind of danger that would be there behind the door? He didn't care. There was a total surrender. When I hear the voice of my master, suddenly all the strength came back to me, the dog said, if he could speak. Suddenly now I'm energized. And when the door swung open, I go for the voice. I go for the direction of the voice, and I'm going to bump into him so hard that he really can feel my presence. That's what he did. Dear brothers and sisters and friends, we live in this end of eternity. We are going to suffer, yes. But if we know our Master and our Lord, we will look forward to hearing his voice. We will surrender to him. We will surrender to him. We do not know his plan for us, but we must trust and surrender. Thank you.